A crime lord who controls an empire through fear. A single mother drowning in debt she doesn't know belongs to him. When violence forces him to reveal the monster he truly is, she has to choose: run from the man who destroyed her life, or trust the only person who's ever bled to protect it. Stay with me until the end of this story. Hit that like button and comment with your city so I can see how far this tale has traveled. The construction site sprawled across 12 acres of Boston's industrial district like a concrete graveyard, skeletal steel beams reaching toward a gray October sky, the constant percussion of hammers and drills creating a symphony of controlled chaos. Victor Moretti stood at the edge of the pit, hands in the pockets of his charcoal suit, watching 200 men build something that existed primarily on paper as legitimate business. The Harlow Tower Project, 38 floors of luxury condos, $300 million in construction costs, and every dollar flowing through Victor's operation, converting dirty money into clean real estate with the precision of a surgical procedure. Concrete trucks are on schedule, Marcus Rivera said beside him, tablet in hand. Marcus had been Victor's right hand for 8 years, a detail-oriented accountant who'd learned to speak both languages fluently, spreadsheets and violence. The pour for Foundation Section C happens Friday. Inspectors already handled. Victor nodded, his dark eyes tracking the movement below. At 38, he'd built an empire that operated in Boston's shadows while presenting an immaculate face to the world. Moretti Development Corporation had its name on half the new buildings rising across the city. Politicians shook his hand at charity galas. Business journals profiled him as a self-made success story. Not one of them knew that his real business was loan sharking, protection rackets, and territorial control that stretched from South Boston to Cambridge. The construction projects were just the washing machine. Problem with the Donnelly payment, Marcus continued, lowering his voice even though they were 50 feet from the nearest worker. He's 2 weeks late. Wants an extension. He got an extension last month. He's asking for another one. Says his restaurant isn't pulling the numbers he projected. Victor's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Set a meeting. Tomorrow. Marcus made a note. He knew what tomorrow's meeting would look like. Everyone knew. You didn't run an operation like Victor's through kindness and second chances. You ran it through absolute certainty. The certainty that debts got paid, rules got followed, and consequences were guaranteed. That's what separated Victor from the dozens of small-time operators who'd tried and failed to control this city. He wasn't cruel for cruelty's sake. He was precise, mathematical. He set clear terms and enforced them without emotion or mercy. People knew exactly where they stood with Victor Moretti, and that clarity made them more afraid than any amount of theatrical violence could. Anything else? Victor asked. Marcus hesitated, which was unusual enough to make Victor turn and look at him directly. There's a food truck, Marcus said, operating on the southwest corner of the site. The crew's been buying lunch from her. And she doesn't have a permit to operate on our property. Technically, she's trespassing. Victor frowned. The Harlow Tower site was supposed to be secured, fences, guards, the whole apparatus. How long? 3 weeks, maybe 4. Handle it. I tried. Sent Tony to tell her to move. Marcus shifted his weight, uncomfortable. She told him to go to hell. Despite himself, Victor felt the corner of his mouth twitch. She told Tony Marchetti to go to hell. Direct quote. You don't own the sidewalk, and if you've got a problem, bring someone who matters. Marcus almost smiled. Tony didn't know what to do with that. No, he wouldn't have. Tony was 6'3", 240, with a face that looked like it had argued with a brick wall and lost. Most people saw Tony and made themselves very small and very agreeable. I'll handle it, Victor said. He shouldn't have. He should have let Marcus deal with it or sent 2 guys to physically remove the truck. That's what made sense. That's what the old Victor would have done, the one who'd clawed his way up from running numbers in Southie to controlling half of Boston's underground, that Victor didn't waste time on food truck operators. But something in the story nagged at him. Someone who looked at Tony Marchetti and didn't blink, who told him to bring someone who matters. Victor wanted to see what that looked like. The truck sat exactly where Marcus said it would. A dented silver Airstream with hand-painted lettering that read, Elena's Kitchen, in blue and yellow. A small crowd of construction workers clustered around the service window, hard hats in hand, laughing at something the woman inside had said. Victor approached from the side, staying back, observing. She was younger than he'd expected, early 30s maybe. Dark hair pulled back in a practical ponytail, no makeup, wearing a simple t-shirt and jeans under a food-stained apron. Pretty in an unpolished way, but that wasn't what caught his attention. It was how she moved. Every gesture efficient, practiced. She assembled a sandwich with the economy of motion you saw in people who'd done the same task 10,000 times, handed it through the window with a smile that reached her eyes. Made change, already reaching for ingredients for the next order before the current customer had walked away. This wasn't someone playing at running a business. This was someone who needed every dollar. "That's $7.50, she said to the worker at the window. "You want chips with that?" "Your chips are the ones from the bag." "Mine are plantain chips. Made them this morning." "Yeah, throw those in." $1.50 more. The worker handed over a 10. She made change, then turned to the next guy in line, and stopped. Her eyes had found Victor. For a moment, neither of them moved. The noise of the construction site faded into white static. Victor was used to reactions when people recognized him, which didn't happen often. He kept his face out of papers and photos for exactly that reason, but which happened enough. Fear, usually. Sometimes calculation. Occasionally defiance from people too stupid to understand what they were challenging, but she didn't recognize him at all. She just saw a man in an expensive suit standing near her truck, and her expression went carefully neutral, assessing. Then she turned back to her customer. "What can I get you, Eddie?" "The usual. Extra pickles." "You got it." Victor waited. The line moved. She worked with that same efficient grace, taking orders, making food, handling money. She didn't look at him again, but he knew she was tracking him in her peripheral vision, aware. Finally, the lunch rush thinned. The last worker walked away with a paper bag, and she turned to face him directly. "We're closed," she said. "You just served 6 people." "Closed to you." She started wiping down her prep surface. "If you're here to tell me to move, I already heard it. I'm on the public sidewalk. Check the property line if you want." "I did. You're 3 feet over." She stopped wiping and looked up. "You measured?" "Someone measured. I saw the results." "And who are you exactly, besides someone who has too much time and a measuring tape?" Victor almost smiled. "The property owner." That landed differently than he'd expected. She didn't flinch or back down, but something changed in her eyes, a calculation running behind them. Then she set down her towel and crossed her arms. "Look," she said, "I know how this works. You want me gone because I don't pay you rent or protection or whatever you call it, but this is my spot. I've been here for a month, and I'm making enough to survive. That's all I'm asking for, just to survive. So if you want to push me out, fine. Do what you're going to do, but I'm not leaving voluntarily." "Why this spot specifically?" "Because 300 workers come through here every day who need lunch, and most of them are tired of eating from the roach coaches that mark up everything 50%. I make actual food, real ingredients, fair prices." She gestured at the construction site. "Your workers appreciate that. You should too." "My workers?" "This is your project, isn't it? The Harlow Tower." She thought he was just the developer, the legitimate face, which meant Marcus had been right. She really didn't know who she was talking to. "What if I offered you a different location?" Victor heard himself say. "One where you're not technically trespassing." She studied him for a long moment. "Why would you do that?" Good question. Victor didn't entirely know the answer himself. "Because the quality argument makes sense," he said instead. "Good food keeps workers happy. Happy workers are productive. And because you're right, you're barely on the property line. Fighting about 3 feet seems inefficient." "What's the catch?" "No catch. There's a corner 2 blocks north with heavy foot traffic. Loading zone during morning hours, but free after 10 a.m. You'd probably do better there anyway." Her eyes narrowed. "And you just happen to know the parking regulations for random street corners?" "I know this neighborhood. I bet you do." But some of the tension had left her shoulders. "What's in it for you?" "Nothing. Consider it goodwill. Nobody offers something for nothing. Then consider it payment for not having to waste my time on lawyers and property disputes." Victor pulled a business card from his pocket and held it out. If you're interested, call my office. We'll arrange it. She didn't take the card immediately, just looked at it, then at him, clearly trying to work out the angle she was missing. "What's your name?" she asked. "Vic." Not a lie, exactly, just not the whole truth. "Elena." She finally reached out and took the card. Elena Hayes. Her hand was rough, kitchen calluses, burned scars on 2 fingers, working hands. Victor found himself noticing details, the tension in her neck, the shadows under her eyes, the way she held herself like someone carrying weight that didn't show. "Think about it," he said, and turned to go. "Hey, Vic." He looked back. "Why were you really watching me for 20 minutes before you said anything?" Victor considered several responses and settled on truth. "I was told you don't scare easy. Wanted to see if that was accurate." "And?" "It's accurate." The smallest smile touched her mouth. Not friendly exactly, but maybe respectful. "Have a good afternoon, Mr. Property Owner." Victor walked back toward the site entrance, aware that he'd just done something out of character. Offering help instead of threats. Extending generosity instead of enforcing terms. Marcus would think he was losing his edge. Maybe he was. But as Victor reached his car, a black Mercedes S-Class that cost more than most people made in 2 years, he found himself looking back at the silver food truck and the woman inside it, and something in his chest felt different than it had an hour ago. Lighter. Or maybe just less certain. Victor didn't expect Elena to call. People usually didn't, when he gave them an out. They took it as a warning. Do what you're told, or next time the offer comes with consequences. He'd assumed she'd move the truck on her own, find some other corner, and that would be the end of it. But 3 days later, his office phone rang with an unfamiliar number. "This is Vic," he answered. "It's Elena, from the food truck." He sat back in his chair, surprised. "You're calling about the location." "I'm calling because I checked out the corner you mentioned, and you're right. It's perfect. Better foot traffic, no property disputes, near a bus stop. Which makes me wonder why you'd just give it away." A pause. "So I'm calling to ask what the real price is." "There isn't one." "Everyone wants something." Victor looked out his office window at the Boston skyline. 23rd floor of a downtown high-rise, corner office, everything chrome and glass and expensive art. From here, you couldn't see the streets where he'd grown up, couldn't see the territories he controlled, couldn't see any of the machinery that actually ran the city. "Have lunch with me," he said. Silence on the line. "That's the price?" Elena finally asked. "Lunch? Call it a consultation. You tell me about your business, what you're trying to build. I tell you about the neighborhood, where the opportunities are, where the problems might come from." "You mean you tell me who I need to pay off?" "I mean, I tell you how things work. What you do with the information is your choice." Another long pause. Victor could almost hear her thinking, weighing options, looking for traps. "One lunch," she said. "Somewhere public. Tomorrow, 1 o'clock. There's a place called Marconi's on Hanover Street. You know it?" "I'll find it." She hung up without saying goodbye. Victor set the phone down and stared at it, asking himself what the hell he was doing. He didn't have time for this, didn't have room in his life for complications. Everything he'd built required focus, discipline, distance. You didn't control an empire by getting personally involved in individual lives. But he'd made the offer, and now he'd see it through. Just lunch, just information. Then he'd go back to his world, and she'd go back to hers, and that would be the end of it. That's what he told himself. Marconi's was a North End institution, red sauce Italian, the kind of place where the owner knew your name and your usual order and probably your grandmother. Victor arrived 10 minutes early and took a corner booth with a sightline to the door. Elena arrived exactly at 1 o'clock. She'd cleaned up from the food truck uniform, jeans and a simple blue blouse, hair down around her shoulders. Still no makeup, still practical, but Victor noticed she'd made an effort. That meant something. She spotted him and walked over, her stride confident despite the obvious tension in her shoulders. "You're early," she said, sliding into the booth across from him. "Professional habit." "Being early?" "Knowing who's in the room before the meeting starts." She glanced around at the handful of other diners, mostly older couples, a few business lunches. "Expecting trouble at an Italian restaurant?" "I'm always expecting trouble. That's how you avoid it." A waiter appeared and they ordered. Chicken parm for her, veal for him. Elena asked for water, Victor ordered a glass of wine, then changed it to water as well. Match her choice. Make her comfortable. So, Elena said once the waiter had gone, tell me about the neighborhood. What do you want to know? Who runs it? Who I need to worry about? You offered information. I'm asking for it. Victor leaned back, studying her. Why do you assume someone runs it? Because I've lived in Boston my whole life, and I know how the city works. There's what you see, and then there's what's actually happening. So who controls this area? Different people control different things. The North End, that's mostly old families. Tradition. They'll leave you alone if you're not disruptive. The waterfront has its own dynamics. Shipping, unions, that kind of thing. Where you're setting up, near Haymarket, that's more mixed territory. Mixed how? Smaller operators, some independent, some not. As long as you're not cutting into anyone's revenue stream, you'll be fine. Elena's eyes narrowed. You sound like you've thought about this a lot. I told you, I know the neighborhood. Are you one of those people? Someone who controls things? The question was direct enough that Victor had to make a choice. Lie cleanly or tell a version of truth. I'm in development, he said. Real estate, construction. That means I work with a lot of people. Contractors, unions, city officials, financing. You learn who matters and who doesn't. And you matter. In certain contexts. She absorbed that, clearly not entirely satisfied, but willing to let it pass. The food arrived, and they ate in silence for a minute. Victor watched her take small bites, eating with the careful efficiency of someone who'd learned not to waste food. What about you? He asked. How'd you end up running a food truck? Long story. I've got time. Elena set down her fork and met his eyes. Whatever she saw there seemed to satisfy something, because she started talking. I was a line cook. Worked at 3 different restaurants over 8 years, working my way up. Got pretty good at it. Then my husband died, and I had a 4-year-old son, and restaurant hours don't work when you're a single parent. So I needed something flexible, something I could control. She shrugged. Food truck seemed like the answer. Save up enough for the truck, get the permits, build a route. Be my own boss. I'm sorry about your husband. It was 2 years ago. Her voice was level, controlled. We're managing. What happened? If you don't mind me asking. Car accident, wrong place, wrong time. He was driving home from work and someone ran a red light. She picked up her fork again. That's life. You make plans, and then something comes out of nowhere and destroys them. Victor knew about destroyed plans, knew about wrong place, wrong time. Though in his world, those phrases usually meant something different. Your son, he said. What's his name? Noah? He's 6 now. Smart kid. Reads above grade level, obsessed with dinosaurs, wants to be a paleontologist when he grows up. That's specific. He watches a lot of documentaries. The smallest smile touched her face when she talked about her son. The first genuine warmth Victor had seen from her. He's the reason I'm doing this. The truck. The business. I need to build something stable for him. Show him that you can get knocked down and still get back up. Sounds like you're doing a good job. I'm surviving. That's not the same as doing a good job. They finished eating. The waiter cleared plates and brought coffee. Outside the window, Hanover Street moved through its afternoon rhythm. Tourists, locals, delivery trucks navigating narrow roads. Can I ask you something? Elena said. Go ahead. Why are you really helping me? And don't give me the thing about goodwill or efficient workers. Nobody operates that way. Victor considered his coffee for a moment. You remind me of someone. Who? My mother. She ran a small business too, seamstress shop in Southie. 3 employees barely keeping the lights on, but she never quit. Never asked for help. Just kept showing up every day and doing the work. What happened to her? She died when I was 17. Heart attack. Too much stress. Too many years of barely making it. I'm sorry. Don't be. She taught me everything that matters. How to work, how to fight, how to survive. Victor met Elena's eyes. When I see someone else fighting that same fight, I respect it. That's all this is. Respect. Elena studied him for a long moment, and Victor had the uncomfortable sensation of being seen, really seen, in a way that most people couldn't manage. Like she was looking past the suit and the careful answers and seeing something underneath. Okay, she finally said. I believe you. Good. But I'm still going to be careful. Because in my experience, When things seem too good to be true, they usually are. Smart. They finished their coffee. Victor paid the check over Elena's mild protest, and they walked out onto Hanover Street together. The afternoon had turned cold, October wind cutting between buildings. "Thank you," Elena said, "for lunch, and the information, and the spot for the truck." "You're welcome." She started to turn away, then stopped. "Vic, if this turns into something with strings attached, if you show up asking for favors or payment or anything else, I want you to know I'll fight. I've got nothing left to lose, which makes me a lot more dangerous than people think." Victor believed her absolutely. "Noted." "Okay, then." She pulled her jacket tighter against the wind. "See you around." She walked away down Hanover Street, and Victor watched until she turned the corner and disappeared. Then he pulled out his phone and called Marcus. "The food truck situation," he said when Marcus answered. "It's handled. Leave her alone." "Boss, I can still—" "I said it's handled. Put the word out." "Elena Hayes, the truck called Elena's kitchen. She's off limits. Anyone gives her problems, they answer to me directly." A pause on the line. "You want to tell me what's going on?" "No." "All right, I'll spread the word." Victor hung up and stood there on the sidewalk for another moment, trying to understand his own decisions. He'd just extended protection to someone for no strategic reason, someone who had nothing to offer him, someone who was objectively a complication he didn't need. But when he'd watched her walk away, when he'd seen that careful strength and quiet determination, something in him had responded, something he'd buried a long time ago under layers of violence and calculation, and the absolute certainty that caring about people made you weak. Maybe it did make you weak, but standing there in the October cold, Victor found he didn't entirely care. Thought. Over the next 2 weeks, Victor created reasons to walk past Elena's new location. Never obvious. Never too frequent. Just checking on nearby properties, meeting contractors, following up on business that happened to take him through Haymarket around lunchtime, and every time he'd stop at the truck. "The usual?" Elena would ask, even though he didn't have a usual yet. "Surprise me." So she did. Cuban sandwich one day, Vietnamese banh mi the next, then an Italian panini that was better than anything he'd had in the North End. She was good, really good, in a way that went beyond basic competence. She understood flavor, understood balance, understood how to make food that was simple and perfect. "Where'd you learn to cook like this?" he asked one Thursday, biting into something she called a mojo pork bowl. "My grandmother, she was from Cuba, taught me everything she knew before she died." Elena handed change to another customer, then turned back to him. "And then restaurants taught me the rest. How to work fast, how to scale recipes, how to run a kitchen that doesn't fall apart during dinner rush." "You miss it? Restaurant work?" "Sometimes. The energy, the team aspect, but not the hours. Not the chefs who think screaming is leadership." She started prepping vegetables for the next order. "This is better. Harder in some ways, but better." "How's Noah adjusting to the new schedule?" She looked up, slightly surprised that he'd remembered her son's name. "He's good. My neighbor watches him after school until I'm done for the day. Mrs. Chen, she's been a lifesaver." "That's good." Other customers came and went, workers from nearby sites, office employees from the buildings around Haymarket, tourists following food recommendations from their phones. Elena handled them all with the same efficient grace, but Victor noticed she smiled more now. Not at him specifically, just in general, like some weight had lifted. "Business is good," he observed. "Better than before. You were right about the foot traffic." She glanced at him. "Thank you. Again, I don't think I said it enough." "You don't owe me thanks." Still. Victor's phone buzzed in his pocket. He checked it. Marcus calling about something urgent. "I have to go." "Okay. Same time tomorrow?" The question was casual, but it landed differently than it should have. Like an invitation to routine, to expectation, to something that looked dangerously close to friendship. "Yeah," Victor said. "Same time tomorrow." He walked away feeling Elena's eyes on his back and wondered, not for the first time, what the hell he thought he was doing. The problem with creating routine was that routine created patterns, and patterns created visibility, and visibility in Victor's world was dangerous. He didn't think about that enough until Marcus cornered him in the office 3 weeks after that first lunch. "We need to talk," Marcus said, closing the door behind him. Victor looked up from the contracts he was reviewing. "About? About the food truck woman. What about her? You've been there every day for 3 weeks. Always at the same time. Always staying for 15, 20 minutes. People are starting to notice." "People? Our people. They're confused, asking questions. Why's the boss visiting some random food truck? Why is she getting protection we didn't authorize? What's the angle?" Victor set down his pen. "There's no angle." "Then what is it?" "I like the food." Marcus stared at him. "You like the food?" "Yes." "Boss, I've known you for 8 years. You don't just like food. You barely eat. Half the time you forget lunch exists until I remind you." "Maybe I'm changing my habits. Or maybe you're making a mistake." Marcus sat down across from him. "Look, I don't care what you do in your personal life. That's your business. But when it starts affecting the operation, when people start asking questions, it becomes mine. So I'm asking, what's going on?" Victor considered how to answer that. The truth was, he didn't entirely know. What had started as curiosity had become something else, something that felt dangerously close to caring. "She doesn't know who I am," he finally said. "I know. And I'd like to keep it that way." "Why?" "Because for 1 hour a day, I can be someone else. Someone who isn't managing territories and collections and enforcement. Someone who just buys lunch and talks about normal things. And that's—" Victor paused, searching for words. "That's worth something to me." Marcus absorbed that silently. Then, "You know this can't last." "I know." "Eventually she'll find out. Or someone will use her to get to you. Or she'll become a liability we can't afford." "I know that too. So what's the end game here?" Victor didn't have an answer to that. He'd been avoiding the question, living day to day, pretending he could keep these two parts of his life separate forever. "There isn't one," he admitted. "I'm just seeing where it goes." "That's not like you." "No, it's not." Marcus stood up. "Your call. I'll keep people from asking too many questions, but Victor, be careful. She seems nice, and maybe she is, but nice people can still hurt you. Sometimes they hurt you worse because you don't see it coming." After Marcus left, Victor sat in his office and stared out at the city. He knew Marcus was right. Knew this was foolish. Knew he was creating a vulnerability that could be exploited. But the next day at 1 o'clock, he was back at Elena's truck anyway. Some mistakes were worth making. The pattern held for 6 weeks. Victor would appear at Elena's truck around 1 o'clock, order whatever she recommended, and they'd talk while she worked through the lunch rush. Nothing deep, nothing that crossed lines, just conversations about food, about the city, about the small details of daily life that Victor had stopped noticing years ago. She told him about Noah's obsession with a Triceratops documentary. He told her about growing up in Southie when it was still rough, before the condos and coffee shops. She complained about her truck's temperamental refrigeration unit. He recommended a mechanic, then quietly made sure the mechanic gave her a fair price without mentioning Victor's name. It was the closest thing to normal he'd had in 20 years. But normal had a way of collapsing when you built it on lies. The first crack appeared on a Tuesday in late November. Victor arrived at the truck to find Elena serving a customer he recognized, Jimmy Caruso, one of the smaller operators who ran protection in Chinatown. Low level, but connected enough to be a problem. Jimmy saw Victor and his whole body language shifted, straightened, got careful. "Mr. Moretti," he said, stepping back from the window. "Didn't know you came here." Elena glanced between them, picking up on the sudden tension but not understanding it. "Jimmy," Victor said evenly, "how's business?" "Good, real good, no complaints." Jimmy grabbed his sandwich and backed away like he'd just remembered an urgent appointment. "I gotta run. Thanks for the food, Elena." He was gone before Elena could give him his change. She stood there holding $3, frowning. Then she looked at Victor. "What was that about?" "What was what?" "That guy acted like you were someone important, called you Moretti, not Vic." Victor's mind raced through options. Deflect, minimize, or tell a partial truth that would satisfy without revealing everything. "Moretti is my last name," he said, "and I've done business with him before. Real estate stuff. Some people are more formal." He looked scared. "Jimmy's nervous around everyone. It's his personality." Elena didn't look convinced, but she let it drop. She made Victor's usual, a Cuban with extra pickles, the way he'd started preferring it, and handed it over. But something had shifted in the air between them, a question mark where there hadn't been one before. Victor ate quickly and left earlier than normal, aware that he'd just dodged something but hadn't actually solved anything. That evening, he called Marcus. Put the word out again. Anyone who comes to Elena's truck, they don't acknowledge me. They don't use my last name. They act like I'm nobody. That's going to seem weird to people who know you. I don't care how it seems. Make it happen. Boss, this is getting complicated. I know. Just do it. But the damage was already seeding. Over the next week, Victor noticed Elena watching him differently, more careful, like she was trying to solve a puzzle she hadn't known existed before. Then Noah got sick. Victor found out because Elena wasn't at the truck one Thursday. Instead, there was a handwritten sign taped to the window. Closed today. Family emergency. He stood there staring at the sign for a full minute, feeling something uncomfortable twist in his chest. Then he pulled out his phone and called the number Elena had given him weeks ago for business questions. She answered on the fourth ring, and her voice was exhausted. Hello? It's Vic. I saw the sign. Is everything okay? A pause. Noah has pneumonia. We're at Boston Medical. They admitted him this morning. Do you need anything? I need my son to stop struggling to breathe. Her voice cracked slightly. Sorry, that came out wrong. I'm just tired. Don't apologize. Which floor are you on? Vic, you don't have to... Which floor? Pediatrics, 4th floor. But really, you don't need to come. I know you're busy. I'll be there in 20 minutes. He hung up before she could argue. Victor made 2 calls on the drive to the hospital. The first was to Marcus, telling him to clear the afternoon schedule. The second was to a doctor he knew, not someone on the payroll exactly, but someone who owed him a favor and would make sure a 6-year-old got the best care Boston Medical could provide. The pediatric floor smelled like antiseptic and fear. Victor found Elena in a waiting area, still wearing her food truck clothes, looking smaller than he'd ever seen her, like someone who'd been running on fumes and finally hit empty. She looked up when he approached, and something in her expression broke. Not tears, she was too tired for tears, but a kind of collapse that happened behind her eyes. Hey, he said quietly, sitting down beside her. You came. Of course I came. Why? The question wasn't hostile, just genuinely confused. We barely know each other. You're a customer. You don't owe me anything. Victor didn't have a good answer to that. How is he? They've got him on oxygen and antibiotics. The doctor says he should be okay, but they want to keep him at least 2 days for observation. Elena rubbed her face. I can't afford 2 days in the hospital. I don't have insurance. Well, I have the cheapest plan I could find, but the deductible is $5,000, and I don't have $5,000. Don't worry about that right now. That's easy to say when you're not the one who has to figure out how to pay for it. A nurse walked by, and Victor flagged her down. Excuse me, Noah Hayes, what room is he in? The nurse checked her tablet. 412. Are you family? Uncle, Victor said without hesitation. Can we see him? Immediate family only right now. Give us another hour to get him settled. After the nurse left, Elena stared at Victor. Uncle? It got us information. You lied to a nurse. I've done worse. She almost smiled. Almost. You're strange, you know that? I've been told. They sat in silence for a while. Hospital sounds filtered through, beeping monitors, distant conversations, the squeak of wheels on linoleum. Elena's leg bounced with nervous energy, and Victor could see her doing math in her head, calculating costs, figuring out what she'd have to sacrifice to cover this. I need to make some calls, she said suddenly, standing up. Figure out who can cover the truck tomorrow. Mrs. Chen, maybe, if she's willing. Or I could just close again, but I can't afford to lose 2 days of revenue on top of hospital bills. Elena. And I need to call my landlord, see if he'll take a partial payment this month. Maybe I can... Elena. Victor stood up and caught her arm gently. Stop. She looked at him and he saw panic there, real panic, the kind that came from being one emergency away from losing everything. The hospital bill is handled, he said. What? It's handled. You're not paying for this. Vic, I can't let you... You're not letting me do anything. I'm doing it. Consider it a favor from someone who can afford it. That's not how favors work. Favors have prices. Not this one. Elena pulled her arm free, and for a moment Victor thought she was going to yell at him. Tell him to back off, to stop interfering, to leave her alone. But instead, she just stood there looking lost. "Why are you doing this?" she asked quietly. "Because you shouldn't have to choose between your son's health and keeping a roof over your head. Because the system is broken, and sometimes someone with resources should step in and fix the immediate problem. Because—" He stopped, realizing he was about to say something he couldn't take back. "Because I want to. That's not a reason. It's the only one I've got." She studied his face like she was seeing him for the first time, really seeing him. "Who are you, Vic?" The question hung between them, heavy with implication. Before Victor could answer, the nurse from earlier appeared. "You can see Noah now. Room 412, 10 minutes, then we need to let him rest." Elena immediately turned and headed for the elevators. Victor followed, aware that he'd just made promises he wasn't sure he could keep without revealing exactly who he was and what he did. Room 412 was small and sterile. Noah was in the bed, looking tiny under the hospital blankets, oxygen tube in his nose. His eyes were closed, but they opened when Elena came in. "Mom," he said, his voice rough. "Hey, baby." Elena was at his side instantly, touching his forehead, checking the monitors like she knew what they meant. "How are you feeling?" "Tired. My chest hurts." "I know. The medicine's going to help. You just need to rest." Noah's eyes found Victor standing by the door. "Who's that?" "That's Vic. He's a friend. He came to check on you." Victor stepped closer to the bed. "Hey, Noah. Your mom tells me you're into dinosaurs." The boy's eyes brightened slightly, despite his obvious exhaustion. "Yeah, I like Triceratops the best. They had 3 horns and a big frill, and they could fight T-Rexes." "Sounds tough." "They were. But they were herbivores, which means they only ate plants. They weren't mean unless something attacked them first." Noah coughed, a wet sound that made Elena's face tighten with worry. "Are you really my uncle?" "No," Victor said, ignoring Elena's sharp look. "I'm your mom's friend. The nurse made a mistake." "Oh." Noah seemed satisfied with that. "Do you like dinosaurs?" "I don't know much about them. Maybe you could teach me sometime." "Okay, when I'm not sick." The nurse came back and told them time was up. Elena kissed Noah's forehead and promised to be back first thing in the morning. Then she and Victor walked back to the elevators in silence. In the parking garage, Elena finally spoke. "You didn't have to do that, any of it." "I know. But you did anyway." "Yes." She turned to face him. "I need you to be honest with me. What do you want? Because in my experience, nobody does this much for nothing. So what is it? You want the business? You want me to owe you? You want—" She stopped and something shifted in her expression. "Is this a romantic thing? Because if it is, I need to know now." Victor considered lying, considered making it simpler than it was. But standing in that concrete parking garage with fluorescent lights buzzing overhead, looking at a woman who'd just spent 6 hours terrified for her son's life, he found he couldn't. "I don't know what this is," he said, "but it's not an angle. It's not a transaction. I'm not keeping score or waiting for you to owe me. I just—" He stopped, struggling with words. "I like talking to you. I like that you're trying to build something for your son. I like that you told Tony Marchetti to go to hell. And when I saw that sign on your truck, my first thought was that you might need help, and I wanted to be the one to provide it. That's all." "That's not all. That's a lot." "Maybe." Elena looked away, processing. "I don't have room in my life for complicated. I barely have room for simple. Everything I've got goes into Noah and the business. There's nothing left. I'm not asking for anything." "Aren't you?" The question hit harder than it should have, because she was right. He was asking for something, even if he hadn't named it yet. Permission to be part of her life, permission to care about what happened to her and her son, permission to be someone other than Victor Moretti for a few hours a week. "I should go," Elena said before he could formulate an answer. "I need to make those calls, figure out tomorrow." "Your neighbor, Mrs. Chen, what's her number?" "Why?" "Because I'm going to call her and arrange for her to watch Noah when he gets discharged. And I'm going to make sure your truck is covered tomorrow so you can be here with your son. And you're going to let me, because arguing takes energy you don't have right now." "Vic, Give me the number, Elena. She stared at him for a long moment. Then she pulled out her phone and read off Mrs. Chen's contact information. You're pushy, you know that? I've been told. And stubborn, also been told. And you're making it very hard for me to keep my distance. Victor met her eyes. Good. Something passed between them then. Not quite a decision, but an acknowledgement. That whatever this was, it wasn't going away. That they'd crossed some line neither of them had meant to cross. I need to go, Elena said again. I know. She walked to her car, an old Honda that had seen better decades, and paused with her hand on the door. Thank you for coming, for caring, for all of it. You're welcome. Victor waited until she'd driven away before pulling out his phone and making a series of calls. First to Mrs. Chen, arranging everything, then to the hospital administrator, making it clear that Noah Hayes' bill would be sent directly to him. Then to Marcus. I need you to check something, he said when Marcus answered. What? Elena Hayes, run her financials. I want to know what kind of debt she's carrying. A pause. Boss, you sure you want to go there? Just do it. This is going to end badly. Probably. Run the financials anyway. Victor hung up and sat in his car, knowing Marcus was right, knowing he was getting in too deep, knowing the smart thing would be to walk away now before this got worse. But Noah's small face in that hospital bed kept flashing through his mind, and Elena's exhausted eyes, and the way she'd looked at him like he was someone who could help, like he was someone worth trusting. He was in too deep already. Might as well see how deep it went. The financials came back 2 days later. Victor was in his office reviewing construction schedules when Marcus walked in and dropped a folder on his desk. You're not going to like this, Marcus said. Victor opened the folder and started reading. Elena's credit report, bank statements, outstanding debts. The picture they painted was worse than he'd expected. Her husband's death had left her with $60,000 in medical debt from his final hospitalization. Car payments. Credit cards maxed out. Student loans from culinary school. Late notices from her landlord. And something else. Something that made Victor's blood go cold. A loan from Premier Capital Solutions. Premier was a front company. Everyone in the business knew it. It operated out of a storefront in Dorchester, offering quick cash to desperate people at interest rates that should have been illegal. 30% compounded monthly, payments due weekly. Miss one payment, and the penalties started stacking. Premier Capital Solutions was owned by a shell corporation, which was owned by another shell corporation, which eventually traced back to a holding company registered in Delaware. A holding company that Victor controlled. How much does she owe? He asked quietly. $22,000. Original loan was $15,000. She's been paying for 18 months and hasn't made a dent in the principal because the interest keeps compounding. Marcus sat down. I'm guessing she doesn't know Premier's yours. No. Does she know you're you? No. Marcus let out a long breath. This is the problem I was worried about. You've been playing civilian with her for 2 months, and now you find out you're the thing destroying her life. Victor stared at the numbers. Elena had been making payments. He could see them in the transaction history. Every week, like clockwork, $50 going to Premier, $50 that barely covered the interest, $50 that should have been going to food, or rent, or Noah. When's her next payment due? Victor asked. Tomorrow. Cancel the debt. What? Cancel it. The whole thing. Make it disappear from the system. Marcus was quiet for a moment. You want to tell me how we're going to explain that? She's going to ask questions, and when she asks questions, she's going to start digging. And when she starts digging, she's going to find out Premier's yours, which means she's going to find out who you really are. I don't care. You should care. This woman has gotten under your skin in a way I've never seen. You're making decisions with your heart instead of your head. That's dangerous. I know. So what's the play here? Victor closed the folder. The play is I fix what I broke, however that needs to happen. And if she finds out the truth, then she finds out. Marcus stood up, shaking his head. For what it's worth, I think you're making a mistake. But it's your mistake to make. After Marcus left, Victor sat alone in his office and thought about Elena in that parking garage. The way she'd asked him what he wanted. The way she'd tried to keep her distance because she didn't have room for complicated. He was the thing making her life complicated. He was the debt she couldn't climb out from under. He was the monster, and he hadn't even known it. Victor picked up his phone and called the manager at Premier Capital Solutions. I need you to pull a file. Elena Hayes, I want the debt marked as paid in full and the account closed. What reason should I put? Administrative error. The debt was assigned to the wrong account. Whatever you want. Just make it go away. You got it, Mr. Moretti. Victor hung up and stared out his window at the city. The smart move would be to disappear from Elena's life now. Let the debt vanish mysteriously. Let her think she'd caught a lucky break, and never show his face at her truck again. But he'd never been good at smart moves where she was concerned. 3 days later, Victor was back at Elena's truck. She looked better, rested, less fragile. Noah was home and recovering, and the crisis had passed. She smiled when she saw him, a real smile that made something warm unfold in his chest. Hey, she said, I was wondering if you'd stopped coming. Just giving you space. How's Noah? So much better. He's back to the dinosaur documentaries, which means he's going to be fine. She started making his usual order without asking. I wanted to thank you again for everything you did. The hospital wouldn't tell me how the bill got paid, but I know it was you. Don't worry about it. That's a lot of money to not worry about. Elena, I'm serious. You need to let me pay you back. I can do installments, work out a schedule, whatever you need. Victor felt the lie sitting on his tongue. Let her pay him back in small amounts that would take years. Keep the connection alive. Keep coming to her truck and pretending he was someone he wasn't. No, he said instead. No? I don't want your money. I don't want installments. I don't want you to owe me anything. He met her eyes. I want you to take the help and use it to build something better for you and Noah. That's all. Elena studied him for a long moment. You're not who you pretend to be, are you? Victor's heart kicked hard against his ribs. What do you mean? I mean, I've been thinking about it. The way people act around you, the way that guy at the hospital, one of the administrators, he looked at you like you were someone important. The way you threw around money like it's nothing. The way you talk, how you carry yourself. She handed him the sandwich. You're not just some developer, are you? This was it. The moment where everything either fell apart or became something real. No, Victor said quietly. I'm not. So who are you? Someone who's made a lot of difficult choices. Someone who operates in areas that aren't exactly legal. Someone who probably shouldn't have started coming to your truck in the first place. Elena absorbed that. Are you dangerous? To you? No, to other people? Sometimes. That's not reassuring. It's the truth. A customer approached, and Elena served them on autopilot, her mind clearly elsewhere. When they were alone again, she leaned against the counter and looked at him. I should tell you to leave, she said. That would be the smart thing, the safe thing. Probably. But I'm not going to. Why not? Because whatever you are outside of this truck, you've never been anything but kind to me. Because you showed up at the hospital when Noah was sick. Because you're the first person in 2 years who's made me feel like I'm not completely alone in this. She paused. And because I think you're trying to be someone different when you're here. Someone better. Victor felt something crack inside his chest. I am. Okay then. Elena straightened up. I don't need to know everything. I don't need to know details. But if you're going to keep coming here, I need you to promise me something. What? Don't lie to me. If I ask you a direct question, you give me a straight answer. Can you do that? Yes. And if things get dangerous, if whatever you do in your other life starts bleeding over into mine, you tell me. You don't hide it. You don't try to protect me by keeping me in the dark. You tell me so I can make my own choices. I can do that. Then we're okay. She held out her hand across the counter. Hi, I'm Elena Hayes, single mother, food truck owner, person who apparently makes questionable decisions about who to trust. Victor took her hand. Her grip was firm, calloused, real. Vic Moretti, developer, investor, person who also makes questionable decisions. They shook, and something shifted between them. An agreement, an understanding, a choice to keep moving forward even though neither of them knew where this was going. So, Elena said, releasing his hand, are you going to tell me what kind of not exactly legal things you do? Some of it, when you're ready to hear it. And the rest? The rest stays in the shadows where it belongs. Fair enough. She grabbed a bottle of water from her cooler and handed it to him. On the house. For honesty. Victor took the water and allowed himself something he rarely did, a genuine smile. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. I haven't decided if this is the stupidest thing I've ever done or the bravest. What if it's both? Then I'm in a lot of trouble. Probably, Victor agreed. But as he walked away from the truck and back toward his car, he couldn't bring himself to feel bad about it. For the first time in years, he'd told someone a version of the truth. For the first time in years, someone had seen past the surface and chosen to stay anyway. It was reckless and dangerous and completely illogical. It was also the most alive he'd felt in 2 decades. The weeks that followed felt different. Victor still came to the truck most days, still ordered lunch, still talked with Elena while she worked. But now there was an honesty underneath it that hadn't existed before. She'd ask him questions, careful ones, testing boundaries, and he'd answer with as much truth as he could afford to give. So, what exactly do you develop? She asked one afternoon in early December, steam rising from the grill behind her. Buildings mostly, commercial properties, residential towers. I buy land, put together financing, manage construction. That's the legal part. That's the legal part, Victor confirmed. And the illegal part? Involves making sure projects run smoothly, that permits get approved, that unions cooperate, that problems get solved before they become bigger problems. Elena flipped a burger, her expression thoughtful. You're talking about bribes. I'm talking about the way things actually work in this city. There's a difference between the way things work and the way things should work. I know. But I operate in the world as it is, not as it should be. She didn't argue with him, just handed the burger to a waiting customer and started assembling the next order. Victor was learning to read her silences. This one wasn't judgment exactly, more like consideration. Like she was filing information away, building a complete picture piece by piece. Do you hurt people? She asked quietly, not looking at him. Sometimes. Often? Not as often as I used to. These days the threat is usually enough. But you would, if you had to. Yes. Elena finally looked up at him. I should be more bothered by that than I am. Why aren't you? I don't know. Maybe because you're honest about it. Maybe because the world hurt me plenty when I was trying to do everything right, so the moral high ground doesn't look as high as it used to. She paused. Or maybe I'm just tired of pretending the world is fair when it obviously isn't. Victor understood that tiredness. He'd felt it himself at 17, watching his mother work herself to death for a business that barely broke even, watching her play by rules that were rigged against her from the start. Your son, he said. Noah. What are you going to tell him about me? Nothing right now. He's 6. He doesn't need to know the complicated parts. Elena wiped down her counter. But eventually, if you keep coming around, he's going to ask questions. And I'm going to need better answers than Vic is mom's friend who does business stuff. What do you want me to be? To him? The question hung between them, weighted with implications neither of them had addressed directly. Elena met his eyes. I want you to be someone who doesn't disappear. Can you do that? I don't know, Victor said honestly. My life is unpredictable, dangerous sometimes. I can't promise I'll always be around. I'm not asking for always. I'm asking for honest effort. Show up when you say you will. Don't make promises you can't keep. Don't let him get attached if you're going to vanish. Okay. Okay. I can do that. Something softened in Elena's expression. Good. Because he already talks about you. Asks when you're coming back. Wants to know if you really want to learn about dinosaurs or if you were just being nice. I really want to learn about dinosaurs. Then you should come to dinner. Tomorrow night. Nothing fancy. Just spaghetti and a very enthusiastic 6-year-old giving you a detailed lecture on the Cretaceous period. Victor knew he should say no. Knew this was crossing another line. Moving from public meetings at a food truck to private time in her home. Knew it was getting more complicated every day. What time was us? He asked. 6:30. I'll text you the address. Elena smiled and it transformed her whole face. Fair warning, Noah's going to make you look at every dinosaur book he owns, all 15 of them. I'll prepare myself. That night, Victor sat in his condo overlooking Boston Harbor and tried to remember the last time someone had invited him to dinner. Not a business dinner, not a social obligation, just dinner because someone wanted his company. He couldn't remember. His phone buzzed with Elena's text. An address in Dorchester, a neighborhood he knew well, working class, mixed immigrant communities, the kind of place where people worked 2 jobs and still struggled to make rent. Marcus called while Victor was still staring at the address. "We have a problem," Marcus said without preamble. "What kind of problem?" "The Donnelly situation. He missed another payment, 3rd one in a row." Victor had almost forgotten about Donnelly, the restaurant owner who'd been asking for extensions. That felt like it belonged to a different life now. "What does he owe total?" Victor asked. $80,000 plus accumulated interest. Puts him at 97. "Set the meeting." "Already did. Tomorrow, 2 o'clock. "Fine. Anything else?" Marcus hesitated. "Yeah, there's talk. About you and the food truck woman." "What kind of talk?" "People wondering if you're getting soft, wondering if she's a weakness they can exploit. The usual sharks smelling blood in the water." Victor's jaw tightened. "Who's talking?" "Does it matter? It's talk. But talk becomes action if people start believing it." "Then make sure they don't believe it." "How do you suggest I do that when you're having dinner at her apartment tomorrow night?" Victor froze. "How do you know about that?" "Because I know everything, boss. That's my job." Marcus's voice was careful. "Look, I'm not judging. I'm just saying you need to be aware of how this looks. You've built your reputation on being untouchable, unmovable, someone who doesn't have personal attachments that can be leveraged, and now you're showing up to family dinners like some civilian boyfriend." "I'm not her boyfriend." "What are you then?" Victor didn't have an answer to that. "Just be careful," Marcus said after a moment. "Please. Because if something happens to her or her kid because of who you are, you're not going to forgive yourself, and I'm not going to forgive myself for not stopping you." After Marcus hung up, Victor sat in the dark and thought about threats and weaknesses and the price of caring about someone in his world. He should cancel, should text Elena some excuse, put distance between them, go back to the safe isolation that had kept him alive this long. Instead, he went to bed early so he wouldn't be tired for dinner tomorrow. Elena's apartment was a 3rd-floor walk-up in a building that had seen better decades. The hallway smelled like cooking spices and old carpet. Victor knocked, and footsteps thundered toward the door. "I'll get it," Noah's voice muffled through the wood. "Let me check first," Elena called back. The door opened to reveal Elena in jeans and a sweater, hair down, looking more relaxed than Victor had ever seen her. Behind her, Noah bounced on his toes, practically vibrating with excitement. "Vic's here," Noah announced. "Mom, Vic's here. Can I show him my dinosaur books now?" "Let him come inside first." Elena stepped back. "Sorry. He's been like this since I told him you were coming." Victor entered the apartment, taking in the small space. Living room and kitchen combined, worn furniture that was clean but clearly secondhand, children's drawings taped to the walls. Everything about it spoke of someone making do, making it work, making the most of very little. But it was warm, lived in, real. Noah grabbed Victor's hand and pulled him toward a bookshelf crammed with dinosaur books. "Okay, so first you need to understand there were 3 periods: Triassic, Jurassic, and Cretaceous. Most people only know about the Jurassic because of the movies, but the Cretaceous is when all the really cool dinosaurs lived." "Noah, let Vic sit down first," Elena said from the kitchen. "It's fine," Victor said, lowering himself to the floor beside the bookshelf. "I'm ready for the lecture." Noah's face lit up like Christmas morning. For the next 45 minutes, Victor learned more about dinosaurs than he'd ever imagined existed. Noah pulled out book after book, explaining the difference between theropods and sauropods, demonstrating how different dinosaurs defended themselves, describing with great enthusiasm exactly how paleontologists knew what they knew. The kid was smart, really smart. The kind of smart that didn't come from memorization, but from genuine curiosity and the ability to make connections between facts. "So the Triceratops is your favorite because it could defend itself but wasn't aggressive?" Victor asked, trying to keep up. "Yeah, it just wanted to eat plants and be left alone. But if something attacked it, it would fight back, and it would win because it had 3 horns and weighed like 6 tons. Noah pointed to an illustration. "See, the horns could be 3 feet long. That's bigger than me. That's very big. Mom says I can be like a Triceratops. Not mean unless someone's mean to me first." Victor glanced at Elena, who was watching them from the kitchen with an expression he couldn't quite read. Your mom's right, Victor said. That's a good way to be. Dinner was simple. Spaghetti with meat sauce, garlic bread, salad. They ate at a small table that barely fit 3 people, Noah continuing his dinosaur commentary between bites. Elena mostly listened, occasionally correcting facts or telling Noah to eat more vegetables, but Victor could feel her watching him, measuring how he interacted with her son, seeing if he was really present or just going through motions. Victor found himself genuinely engaged. Noah reminded him of himself at that age, curious, intense, looking for patterns and rules that made the world make sense. Before everything got complicated, before he learned that the world didn't actually make sense, it just pretended to. After dinner, Noah brought out a puzzle. It's a T-Rex skeleton, he explained, dumping 500 pieces on the living room floor. We can build it together. Noah, Vic might not want to. I want to, Victor said. So they built the puzzle. Noah tackled the edge pieces while Victor sorted by color, and Elena cleaned up from dinner. It was domestic and mundane and completely foreign to Victor's normal life. No weapons, no threats, no calculations about power and control, just a puzzle and a kid and the quiet sound of someone washing dishes in the kitchen. Why don't you have kids? Noah asked suddenly, fitting 2 pieces together. Noah, Elena warned from the kitchen. It's okay, Victor said. I never met the right person, and my job keeps me pretty busy. What's your job? I build buildings. Big ones. Like skyscrapers? Sometimes. That's cool. I want to dig up dinosaurs when I grow up. Mom says I have to go to college first, but I'm already reading books about it. Your mom's right. College will help you be better at what you want to do. Noah considered this. Did you go to college? No. How come? Because I had to start working when I was young. Help my family. But I wish I had. I think I would have liked it. Mom went to culinary school. That's like college for cooking. She showed me her certificate. It's in a frame. Victor glanced toward the kitchen, where Elena had gone very still. That's impressive, he said quietly. By 8:30, Noah was yawning through his dinosaur facts. Elena sent him to brush his teeth and change for bed. While he was gone, she sat down on the couch next to Victor. Thank you, she said, for being good with him, for not treating him like he's annoying. He's not annoying, he's smart. You're raising a good kid. I'm trying. Elena picked at a loose thread on the couch. His dad was good with him too. They used to build Lego sets together for hours. I think Noah misses that, having a guy around who pays attention to him. I can be that, if you want. She looked at him. This is getting real, isn't it? Yeah. I'm scared. Of what? Of you leaving, of Noah getting attached and then you disappearing because your other life gets too dangerous or complicated. Of letting myself trust you and then finding out I was wrong. Victor wanted to promise her she was safe, that he'd always be there, that nothing bad would happen. But he'd already committed to honesty. I can't promise I won't disappear, he said. My life is what it is, but I can promise I won't do it without telling you why. And I can promise that if I'm here, I'm all in, not halfway, not just going through the motions. Is that enough? I don't know, but it's all I've got. Elena was quiet for a moment, then she leaned her head against his shoulder, just for a second, before sitting up straight again as Noah came running back in wearing dinosaur pajamas. Can Vic read me a story? Noah asked. Elena looked at Victor, giving him an out if he wanted it. Sure, Victor said. Noah's room was tiny, barely big enough for a twin bed, a small dresser, and a bookshelf. Glow-in-the-dark stars covered the ceiling, more dinosaur posters on the walls, a nightlight shaped like a triceratops. Noah climbed into bed and handed Victor a book about a T-Rex who couldn't reach things because his arms were too short. Victor sat on the edge of the bed and read, doing different voices for the characters, making Noah giggle. You're good at reading, Noah said when the story ended. Thanks. Will you come back for dinner again? Victor glanced at the doorway where Elena was leaning against the frame, listening. If your mom says it's okay, yes. It's okay, Elena said softly. Noah smiled and settled deeper into his pillows. Okay, good night, Vic. Good night, Noah. Victor stood up, and Elena walked him to the door. They stood in the small entryway, close enough that Victor could smell her shampoo, something simple, maybe lavender. "So," she said. "So, that was nice?" It was. "We should probably talk about what this is. What we're doing." "Probably. But not tonight." "No, not tonight." Elena reached out and touched his hand briefly. "Drive safe." Victor left the apartment and walked down 3 flights of stairs, and with each step he felt the weight of his other life settling back onto his shoulders. By the time he reached his car, he was checking sightlines, scanning for threats, thinking about the Donnelly meeting tomorrow and what that would require. But underneath all of that, he could still feel Noah's excitement about dinosaurs, could still hear Elena's quiet thank you, could still remember what it felt like to be somewhere warm and real for a few hours. It was dangerous, getting attached, but he was already past the point of turning back. The Donnelly meeting was set for 2 o'clock at a warehouse Victor owned near the docks. Marcus was already there when Victor arrived, along with 2 of their people, Tony and another guy named Ray, who was good at looking intimidating without having to do much. Frank Donnelly showed up 10 minutes late, sweating despite the December cold. He was mid-40s, running a restaurant in Cambridge that had been moderately successful until he'd taken out a loan to expand. The expansion had failed. Now he was drowning. "Mr. Moretti," Donnelly said, his voice shaking. "Thanks for meeting with me." "Sit down, Frank." They sat across from each other at a metal table. Marcus stood behind Victor. Tony and Ray flanked the door. "You know why you're here," Victor said. "I know. I'm behind. I'm trying to catch up, I swear. Business has been slow, but it's picking up. The holidays are coming. People are booking parties. I just need a little more time. You said that 2 months ago." "I know, but... and 2 months before that." Donnelly's face crumpled. "Please. I've got a family, 2 kids in school. If I lose the restaurant, I lose everything. Just give me until after New Year's. I'll get you the money." Victor had heard this speech 100 times. Everyone had a family. Everyone had kids. Everyone needed just a little more time. If he gave extensions to everyone who asked, he'd be out of business in 6 months. The old Victor would have made an example of Donnelly. Not killed him, that was messy and drew attention, but hurt him enough that the message spread. Pay your debts or pay another way. But he kept thinking about Elena's face when she'd talked about her late husband's medical bills, about Noah asking why Victor didn't have kids, about what it felt like to sit on the floor building a dinosaur puzzle while someone who trusted you washed dishes in the next room. "How much can you pay right now?" Victor asked. Donnelly blinked. "What?" "Right now. Today. How much can you actually give me?" Maybe 10,000. If I empty my personal account and the restaurant's reserves. And if I gave you 6 months, what could you pay?" "The full amount. I'm sure of it. The restaurant's turning around. I just need time for it to..." "Frank," Victor's voice cut through the desperate rambling. "Don't lie to me. 6 months, realistically, what can you pay?" Donnelly's shoulders sagged. "Maybe half. 50,000. Victor did the math. 10 now, 50 in 6 months. That was 60 out of 97. A loss of 37,000, plus the time value of money, plus the message it sent to everyone else who owed him. Marcus would tell him this was stupid. He'd be right. "Here's what's going to happen," Victor said. "You pay me 10,000 today. Then you pay me 2,000 a month for the next 12 months. That's 34 total. We'll call it even." Donnelly stared at him. That's 60,000 less than I owe. I know how much it is." "Why would you do that?" "Because I'm trying something different, because your kids didn't sign up for their father's mistakes, and I'm tired of making orphans." Victor leaned forward. "But Frank, understand this. You miss one payment, one single payment, and the deal's off. You'll owe me the full amount, and I won't be this generous again. Are we clear?" "Yes, absolutely." "Thank you, Mr. Moretti. Don't thank me. Just pay your bills on time." Donnelly left 20 minutes later with a new payment schedule and visible relief. After he was gone, Marcus turned to Victor. "What the hell was that?" "A business decision." "That was the opposite of a business decision. You just wrote off $60,000. He'll make his payments. And if he doesn't? Then I'll handle it. But I think he will." Tony and Ray left. Marcus stayed, studying Victor with an expression that was half concern, half disbelief. "This is about her, isn't it?" Marcus said. The food truck woman. Elena. Elena. This is about her. Victor didn't answer. Boss, I get it. I do. But you can't rebuild your entire operation around one person's moral compass. Word's going to spread that you're going soft. Other people are going to ask for deals. You're going to have to start saying no, and then they're going to wonder why Donnelly got special treatment. So we adjust the story. We say Donnelly had information we needed. We say he's working off his debt in other ways. Whatever keeps the sharks from circling. And when people find out the truth, they won't. Because you're going to make sure they don't. Marcus shook his head but didn't argue. You're playing a dangerous game. I've been playing a dangerous game my whole life. This is just a different kind of danger. That night, Victor drove to Elena's truck. She was closing up for the day, wiping down surfaces, packing away ingredients. Hey, she said when she saw him. You're late. I thought maybe you weren't coming. Had a meeting that ran long. Everything okay? Yeah, actually better than okay. Elena studied his face. You look different. Different how? I don't know. Lighter, maybe? She locked the truck and came to stand in front of him. What happened? Victor thought about Donnelly's face when he'd realized he was getting mercy instead of punishment. Thought about his own surprise at giving it. I did something I wouldn't have done a few months ago, he said, and it felt good. That's cryptic. I gave someone a second chance, someone who probably didn't deserve it by the rules I normally play by. But I did it anyway. Elena's expression softened. Why? Because of you, because of Noah. Because I spent last night building a dinosaur puzzle, and it reminded me that not everything has to be transactions and consequences. Vic, I'm not saying I'm changing everything. I can't. My world doesn't work that way. But maybe I can change some things, small things. Maybe that's enough. Elena reached out and took his hand. Her fingers were cold from the December air. It's a start. They stood there on the sidewalk while the city moved around them, cars passing, people walking home from work, the world indifferent to two people trying to figure out if they could build something real out of broken pieces. Come to dinner again this week, Elena said. Thursday. Noah's already asking when you're coming back. Okay. And Vic, thank you for trying. I know it's not easy. Nothing worth doing is easy. She smiled, squeezed his hand once, and let go. Good night. Victor watched her drive away in her old Honda, then got into his Mercedes and sat there for a while thinking about the distance between those two cars, between her world and his, between who he'd been and who he might become. His phone rang. Marcus. We've got a situation, Marcus said, his voice tight. The Premier account. Someone's been asking questions. Victor's blood went cold. What kind of questions? About the Hayes debt that got wiped. About why it disappeared. One of the other loan officers noticed and started digging. Handle it. I'm trying, but boss, if they dig deep enough, they're going to connect Premier to you. And if they connect Premier to you, and Hayes finds out her debt was yours all along. Victor closed his eyes. I know. This is what I was worried about. The more complicated this gets, the harder it is to keep all the pieces separate. I said I'll handle it. How? Victor didn't have an answer. He just knew he had to find one before Elena discovered the truth, and everything he'd built with her collapsed. I'll figure it out, he said, and hung up before Marcus could argue. But sitting alone in his car with the engine running, Victor had the sinking feeling that he was running out of time to keep his two worlds from colliding. And when they did, someone was going to get hurt. He just hoped it wouldn't be Elena or her son. Victor had 48 hours to fix the Premier Capital problem before the loan officer's questions reached someone who'd actually care. He spent those hours methodically erasing digital trails, paying off the curious employee with enough money to retire early, and restructuring the shell companies so nothing traced back to him directly. By Wednesday afternoon, the problem was contained, but the close call stayed with him like a warning he couldn't ignore. Thursday dinner at Elena's was quieter than the first time. Noah had a cold and went to bed early after barely touching his food. Elena seemed distracted, moving through the kitchen with mechanical efficiency rather than her usual purposeful grace. You okay? Victor asked, helping her clear plates. Just tired. It's been a long week. She scraped food into the trash, her movements sharp. I got a weird call yesterday from Premier Capital Solutions. Victor's entire body went still. What kind of call? They said my account was closed due to an administrative error, that the debt had been assigned to the wrong person and they were sorry for the confusion. Elena turned to look at him. $22,000 just disappeared, gone, like it never existed. That's good news. Is it? Because I've been paying that loan for 18 months. I've got all the paperwork. I've got bank records showing every transfer. And now they're telling me it was all a mistake? She crossed her arms. That doesn't happen, Vic. People like me don't get that kind of luck. Maybe you do. Or maybe someone made it happen. Her eyes were sharp, searching. Someone with enough money and influence to make a debt disappear. Victor could lie. Should lie. Redirect her suspicion, make up a story about bank errors and bureaucratic incompetence. But he'd promised her honesty. I looked into it, he said carefully. After Noah got sick, after I saw how stressed you were, I wanted to understand what you were dealing with. You looked into my finances? I had someone run your credit report, see what kind of debt you were carrying. Elena's face went pale, then flushed with anger. You did what? I wanted to help. By invading my privacy? By digging through my personal information without asking? She moved away from him, putting the kitchen counter between them. Who the hell do you think you are? Someone who cares about you. That's not caring, that's controlling. That's treating me like I'm a problem to be solved instead of a person who gets to make her own choices. You were drowning. That loan was destroying you. The interest alone was my business, my responsibility. Elena's voice rose, then dropped as she remembered Noah sleeping in the next room. I didn't ask you to fix it. I didn't ask you to dig into my life. I asked you to be honest with me, and you went behind my back instead. Victor knew she was right, knew he'd crossed a line. But the alternative had been watching her struggle under debt he'd unknowingly created, and he couldn't stomach that. I'm sorry, he said. Are you? Or are you sorry you got caught? Both. I should have told you what I found. Should have asked before I did anything. But Elena, that loan, the company that owned it, what about it? This was the moment. Tell her the whole truth and watch everything fall apart, or tell her just enough to explain his actions without revealing how deep his culpability ran. The company has a reputation, Victor said instead. Predatory lending. They target people who are desperate, people who can't get traditional loans, and they bury them in interest. I've seen what they do. I couldn't watch them do it to you. It wasn't exactly a lie. Premier did all those things. The lie was in the omission, that he was the one who'd built that system. Elena studied him for a long moment. How did you make the debt disappear? I know people. I made some calls. What kind of calls? The kind that convinced them to write it off as a loss and move on. You threatened them. I persuaded them. With what? Money? Violence? What exactly did you do, Vic? Victor met her eyes. Do you really want to know the details? She opened her mouth, closed it, looked away. No, I don't. Because if you tell me, then I'm complicit. Then I'm part of whatever you did, and I can't unknow it. So what do you want from me? I want you to understand that I'm not a damsel in distress. I'm not some charity case you get to rescue to feel better about yourself. I was handling my problems, slowly, painfully, but I was handling them. Elena's voice shook. And you took that away from me. You took away my right to fight my own battles. I was trying to help. I know. That's what makes it worse. You genuinely thought you were doing the right thing, which means you don't understand why it's wrong. Victor absorbed that, feeling the truth of it settle uncomfortably in his chest. He'd spent so long operating in a world where power meant solving problems by force that he'd forgotten some people needed to solve their own problems, needed the agency more than they needed the solution. You're right, he said quietly. I should have talked to you first, asked what you needed instead of assuming I knew. Yes, you should have. I can't undo it. The debt's gone, but I can promise it won't happen again. I can promise to ask next time. Will there be a next time? Elena's question was soft but pointed. Or is this the part where you realize I'm too much trouble and disappear? Is that what you want? For me to leave? I want you to understand what you did wrong. Really understand it. Not just apologize because you got caught. Victor thought about that. About the difference between regret for consequences and regret for actions. About whether he truly believed he'd been wrong to erase her debt, or just wrong to do it without telling her. I understand that I violated your trust, he said slowly. I understand that I made a decision about your life without including you in it. And I understand that even though my intentions were good, intentions don't erase harm. He paused. But I can't honestly say I regret making that debt disappear. I regret how I did it. I regret not being transparent, but the outcome? I don't regret that. At least you're honest about it. That's what you asked for. Honesty. Elena leaned against the counter, suddenly looking exhausted. This is complicated. I know. I should probably tell you to leave. Tell you this isn't working, that we're too different, that your world and mine don't mix. Probably, but I don't want to. She looked at him, and her eyes were wet. That's the problem. I should want you gone, but I don't. Noah doesn't. You're the first good thing that's happened to us in years, and I hate that I'm grateful for something you did without my permission. Victor crossed the kitchen and stood in front of her, not touching, but close enough that she could reach him if she wanted to. What do you need from me? He asked. I need you to promise that if you're going to be in our lives, you're going to treat me like an equal. Not someone to be managed or protected or fixed. An equal. I promise. And I need you to tell me the truth about Premiere, about how you really made that debt disappear. No more vague explanations about knowing people. Victor's stomach dropped. Elena. The truth, Vic. That's what we agreed on. He could see the determination in her face. She wasn't going to let this go. And if he lied now, she'd know. She'd always know, and it would poison everything between them. I own Premiere, Victor said. The words hung in the air like a grenade with the pin pulled. Elena's expression didn't change for several seconds. Then understanding crept across her face, followed by something that looked like horror. You own it, she repeated. Through several shell companies, yes. The loan that's been destroying my life for 18 months. The loan that kept me up at night. The loan that made me choose between feeding my son and making payments. That loan was yours. I didn't know. When I first met you, I had no idea you had a debt with one of my companies. I only found out when I ran your credit report. And that's supposed to make it better? That you accidentally ruined my life? I'm not trying to make it better. I'm just telling you the truth like you asked. Elena pressed her hands to her face, breathing hard. Get out. Elena, get out of my apartment. Now. Please, just let me explain. There's nothing to explain. Her voice cracked. You're the monster. You're the thing that's been crushing me, and I let you into my home. I let you near my son. She stopped, shaking her head. I need you to leave. Right now. Victor knew better than to argue. He grabbed his coat and walked to the door, then paused with his hand on the knob. For what it's worth, he said quietly. I'm sorry. Not for making the debt disappear. I'll never be sorry for that. But for being the reason it existed in the first place. For building a system that hurt you. For that, I'm genuinely sorry. Just go. Victor left. He sat in his car for 20 minutes, staring at the lit windows of Elena's apartment, before finally driving away. The next 3 days were the worst Victor had experienced in years. He didn't go to Elena's truck, didn't call or text, gave her the space she clearly needed, even though every hour felt like he was being slowly carved apart. Marcus noticed immediately. You look like hell, he said Friday morning, setting coffee on Victor's desk. I'm fine. You're not fine. What happened? Elena found out about Premiere. Marcus swore. How'd she take it? About as well as you'd expect. She threw me out. Can't say I'm surprised. You were the thing destroying her life, boss. That's a hard thing to come back from. I know. So what are you going to do? Victor stared at the city through his office window. I don't know. Give her time, I guess. Hope she doesn't hate me forever. And if she does, then I live with it. But living with it was harder than he'd anticipated. Victor found himself driving past her truck location just to see if she was there. She always was, serving customers with the same efficient grace, looking tired but functional. He never stopped, never got out of the car, just watched from a distance like some kind of stalker and hated himself for it. On Monday, Marcus came into his office with an expression Victor had learned to recognize as trouble. "We have a situation," Marcus said. "What kind?" "The Kozlov brothers. They're making moves in Southie. Small stuff so far, shaking down a few businesses, pushing into corners they know are ours. Testing boundaries." The Kozlovs were new to Boston. Russian operation, mid-level ambition, smart enough to be dangerous, but not smart enough to understand the ecosystem they were disrupting. Victor had been watching them for months, waiting to see if they'd settle into a niche or become a problem. Apparently, they'd chosen problem. "Set a meeting," Victor said. "Already tried. They declined." "They declined?" "Said they don't take meetings with people who've gone soft." Marcus's expression was carefully neutral. "Word spreading about Donnelly, about you giving extensions and writing off debts. People think you're losing your edge." Victor felt something cold and familiar settle into his chest. The old calculation. The old ruthlessness. The part of him that had built this empire by making certain everyone understood the cost of disrespect. "Where are they operating from, like?" he asked. "Warehouse in Andrew Square. They're using it to store product and run their collections." "How many people?" 6 to 8 at any given time, more if they're expecting trouble." "They should be expecting trouble." Victor stood up. "Get Tony and Ray, and bring Jake. I want someone who can handle the technical side if we need to shut down their operation completely." Marcus didn't move. "Boss, are you sure about this? Going in hard sends a message, but it also escalates. The Kozlovs have connections back in Brighton Beach. You hit them, they might hit back." "Good. Let them try. I need to remind this city why people don't test me." "This is about Elena." Victor looked at Marcus sharply. "You're proving you haven't gone soft," Marcus continued. "You're proving that even if you give one woman special treatment, you're still the same Victor Moretti who built this operation. You're making a statement." "So what if I am?" "So make sure it's the statement you want to make, because once you go down this road, there's no walking it back." Victor thought about Elena's face when she'd told him to leave, thought about the disgust in her voice, thought about how she'd looked at him like he was exactly the monster she'd been afraid of all along. Maybe he was. Maybe he'd been fooling himself thinking he could be anything else. "Set it up," Victor said. "We go in tomorrow night." The warehouse sat in an industrial area where nobody asked questions and nobody looked too closely at what their neighbors were doing. Victor arrived at 11 p.m. with Marcus, Tony, Ray, and Jake, 4 men who'd been with him long enough to handle this without needing detailed instructions. "Cameras?" Victor asked Jake. "Disabled. They'll see static for the next 30 minutes. "Good." "Tony, Ray, front approach. Marcus and I will come from the loading bay. Jake, you stay with the car. If anyone comes out that isn't us, you know what to do." They moved like parts of a machine. No wasted motion, no hesitation. Victor had done this 100 times, knew exactly how it would play out. They'd breach, neutralize any resistance, deliver the message, and leave. Surgical and efficient. The front door was locked. Tony kicked it in. Inside, the warehouse was divided into sections. Storage in the back, a makeshift office area, living quarters where some of the Kozlovs clearly slept on site. 4 men were present when Victor and his crew entered. 2 more appeared from the back within seconds. "What the hell?" one of them started. Victor shot him in the leg. The man went down screaming. The others froze, hands reaching for weapons, but not quite committed. "Everyone on the ground," Victor said calmly. "Hands where I can see them. Now!" They complied, fear overriding bravado. Victor walked between them, gun still drawn, making eye contact with each one. "Where's Dmitri?" he asked. Nobody answered. Victor shot the ceiling. The sound was deafening in the enclosed space. I asked a question. "Where's Dmitri Kozlov?" "Not here," one of them finally said. "He's in New York, meeting suppliers." "When's he back?" "Friday." "Good. That gives you time to deliver a message." Victor crouched down next to the man who'd answered. "You tell Dmitri that Southie belongs to me. The businesses he's been shaking down? Mine. The corners he's been operating on? Mine. This whole city? Mine. And if he wants to operate here, he does it by my rules, or he doesn't do it at all. Are we clear?" Yeah, we're clear." "I don't think you are." Victor stood and nodded to Tony. What happened next was controlled violence. Not excessive, Victor didn't believe in wasting energy, but thorough. Tony and Ray worked through the men on the floor with methodical efficiency. Broken bones, split lips, cracked ribs. Enough pain to make the memory stick, but not enough damage to cripple. The man Victor had shot in the leg was screaming. Marcus dragged him to a chair and started asking questions about the Kozlov operation. Who they were connected to, where their money came from, what their long-term plans were. Victor watched it all with the cold detachment he'd perfected over 2 decades. This was who he was. This was what he did. Not dinners with 6-year-olds who loved dinosaurs, not conversations with women who made him want to be better. This. Violence and control and absolute certainty. They left the warehouse 23 minutes after entering. The men inside would need medical attention but would live. The message would reach Dmitry Kozlov by morning, and the word would spread through Boston's underworld that Victor Moretti hadn't gone soft at all. In the car on the way back, nobody spoke. They dropped off Tony, Ray, and Jake at various locations until it was just Victor and Marcus. "You feel better?" Marcus asked. "No." "Didn't think so. But it was necessary. Was it? Or did you just need to prove something to yourself?" Victor didn't answer. They drove in silence until Marcus pulled up to Victor's building. "For what it's worth," Marcus said, "I don't think Elena's going to care that you're still scary. I think she's going to care that you're the person who put her in debt in the first place. And tonight didn't change that." "I know." "So, what's the plan?" "I don't have one." Victor went upstairs to his empty condo and stood in the shower until the water ran cold, scrubbing blood off his hands that probably wasn't even there. Then he sat on his couch in the dark and thought about the distance between who he was and who Elena needed him to be. The distance felt infinite. His phone buzzed around 2 a.m. An unknown number. Victor considered ignoring it, then answered, "Hello? Vic?" Elena's voice tight with fear. "I need help." Victor was on his feet instantly. "What's wrong? Are you hurt?" "There are men outside my apartment. 3 of them. They've been there for an hour. I called the police, but they said there's nothing they can do unless the men actually do something." Her voice dropped to a whisper. "I think they're waiting for me to come out." "Are your doors locked? Windows?" "Yes, all of them. But Vic, they know which apartment is mine. One of them pointed at my window." "Where's Noah?" "Asleep. I haven't told him anything." Victor was already moving, grabbing his keys, his gun, his coat. "I'm on my way. Stay inside. Don't open the door for anyone. I'll be there in 15 minutes. "Vic, what if They won't. I promise. 15 minutes. He made it in 12, driving through red lights and ignoring every traffic law Boston had. Elena's building was dark except for a few scattered lit windows. Victor spotted the 3 men immediately, standing near the entrance, smoking cigarettes, trying to look casual and failing. He parked half a block away and approached on foot, keeping to shadows until he was close enough to get a clear look at them. Young, probably mid-20s, wearing clothes that tried too hard to look expensive. Not professionals. Maybe connected to someone. Maybe just opportunistic criminals who'd heard about a single woman living alone. Either way, they'd made a mistake. Victor stepped out of the shadows. "You boys lost?" All 3 turned. The one in the middle, clearly the leader, or at least the one who thought he was, sized Victor up and smirked. "Private property," he said. "Keep walking." "Funny. I was about to tell you the same thing." "Look, old man, we're not looking for trouble, just waiting for someone. Why don't you go home before this gets ugly?" Victor smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. "I am home. And you're standing in front of it." The leader's smirk faded. He looked at Victor more carefully, and something in his expression changed. Recognition, maybe. Or just survival instinct finally kicking in. "We don't want problems," he said, less cocky now. "Then leave. We're just talking to someone, that's all. Just a conversation." "About what?" The leader hesitated, glancing at his friends. "Her husband owed money. We're here to collect. Her husband's been dead 2 years. Debt doesn't die just because the debtor does." Victor felt rage flash through him, white-hot and dangerous. "Who sent you?" "That's not your business." Victor had his gun out before any of them could react. Not pointed at anyone, just visible. A statement. "I'm making it my business. Who sent you?" The leader's hands went up. Okay, just calm down. Guy named Petrov. Anton Petrov. He runs collections for... I know who he runs for. Victor did know. Petrov was connected to the Kozlovs. This wasn't random. This was retaliation for tonight's warehouse visit. They'd found out about Elena somehow, connected her to Victor, and decided to hit where it would hurt most. Tell Petrov that if anyone comes near this building again, if anyone so much as looks at the woman who lives here, I will personally make sure Anton Petrov spends the rest of his life regretting it. Are we clear? Yeah, clear. Now leave. Don't come back. Don't call. Don't send anyone else. This woman and her son are off limits. Spread that word to whoever needs to hear it. The three men backed away, trying to maintain dignity while clearly wanting to run. Victor watched until they'd gotten into a car and driven off. Then he pulled out his phone and called Marcus. I need you to find Anton Petrov, Victor said. Tonight. Bring him to the warehouse, the one on Northern Avenue. Boss, it's 2 a.m. I don't care what time it is. Find him. Make it clear this isn't optional. What are you going to do? Make sure Elena and her son never have to worry about this again. Victor hung up and looked up at Elena's window. The light was on, and he could see her silhouette against the curtain. He texted her. They're gone. I'm coming up. The reply came seconds later. 4th floor, apartment 4B. Elena opened the door before he could knock, and Victor could see she'd been crying. Her eyes were red, her face pale. Are they really gone? She asked. Yes, and they won't come back. How do you know? Because I told them what would happen if they did. Elena stepped back to let him inside. The apartment looked the same as it had a week ago, but everything felt different, fragile, exposed. Who were they? Elena asked. Men making a mistake? It's handled. That's not an answer. It's the only one I can give you right now. Elena wrapped her arms around herself. This is because of you, isn't it? They came here because of something you did. Victor wanted to lie, wanted to protect her from the truth, but he'd promised honesty. Yes. What did you do? I sent a message to some people who were pushing into my territory. They sent a message back. Unfortunately, they decided to send it through you. Through me. Like I'm just a tool to get to you. I'm sorry. Sorry doesn't help. Sorry doesn't change the fact that men showed up at my home because you decided to play gangster. Elena's voice was shaking. My son was sleeping 20 feet away, and men who collect debts for violent people were standing outside, and you think sorry fixes that? No. I don't think sorry fixes anything, but I can make sure it doesn't happen again. How? Victor met her eyes. By making it very clear that you're untouchable. That anyone who comes near you or Noah answers to me personally, by making the cost so high that nobody would ever consider it. So more violence, more threats, if that's what it takes. And what happens when someone decides the cost is worth it? When someone wants to hurt you badly enough that they don't care about consequences? Elena's voice broke. What happens to Noah then? Victor didn't have a good answer to that, because she was right. There was always someone willing to pay any price for revenge. Always someone who'd see a 6-year-old boy as acceptable collateral damage. I'll keep you safe, he said. You can't promise that. Nobody can. They stood in her small living room, the distance between them feeling vast despite being only a few feet apart. I should never have started coming to your truck, Victor said quietly. I should have stayed away, kept my world separate from yours. But I didn't, and now you're caught up in something you never asked for. No, I didn't ask for it, but I'm in it anyway. Elena wiped at her eyes. I don't know what to do, Vic. Part of me wants to tell you to leave and never come back, to protect Noah from whatever danger you bring with you. But part of me... She stopped. Part of me is glad you came tonight. Glad you were the person I called. And I hate that I feel that way. You shouldn't feel bad about wanting help. I feel bad about needing it from you. From the person who created half my problems in the first place. Victor absorbed that truth. You're right. About all of it. And if you want me gone, I'll go. I'll make sure you're protected from a distance. You'll never see me again, but nobody will touch you or Noah. I can arrange that. Elena looked at him for a long moment. Is that what you want? No, but it's not about what I want. What if I don't know what I want? Her voice was small, exhausted. What if I'm too tired and scared to make good decisions right now? Then don't make any decisions. Just let me make sure you're safe tonight. We can figure out the rest later. Elena nodded slowly. Okay, will you stay? Just for tonight? I don't want to be alone. Yeah, of course. She led him to the couch, and they sat in the dim light from the kitchen, not touching but close enough to feel each other's presence. Victor stayed alert, listening for sounds from outside, ready for anything. Elena eventually fell asleep with her head against his shoulder, and he stayed perfectly still so he wouldn't wake her. Through the window, Boston's nightlights glittered like broken glass. And Victor made a choice. He was going to end this, whatever it took, however far he had to go. The Kozlovs, Petrov, anyone who might see Elena as a target, they were all going to learn what happened when someone threatened the few things Victor Moretti actually cared about. Tomorrow, he'd start burning his world down to protect hers. Tonight, he'd just sit here and let her sleep. It was the least he could do. Victor left Elena's apartment at dawn, after she'd woken and insisted she'd be fine. After Noah had stumbled out of his room, asking why Vic was there so early, after Victor had made pancakes while Elena showered and tried to pretend the previous night hadn't happened. But it had happened, and Victor wasn't going to let it happen again. He met Marcus at a diner in South Boston at 7 a.m. Marcus looked like he hadn't slept, which meant he'd spent the night doing what Victor had asked. Petrov's at the warehouse, Marcus said, sliding into the booth across from him. Wasn't happy about it. Had to convince him pretty hard. I don't care if he's happy. What's the play here, boss? You lean on Petrov, the Kozlovs escalate. They escalate. This turns into a war. You sure you want that? Victor drank his coffee and thought about Elena's face when she'd asked what happened when someone didn't care about consequences. Thought about Noah sleeping 20 feet away from men who'd come to threaten his mother. I want it over, he said. Completely over. No half measures, no temporary solutions. I want the Kozlovs out of Boston, and I want everyone to understand why they left. That's going to cost. Money, relationships, maybe blood. I know what it's going to cost. Marcus studied him. This woman really got to you, didn't she? She showed me what I'd become, what I'd built, and I don't like it. So you're going to burn it all down? No, I'm going to rebuild it into something I can live with. Victor set down his coffee. Starting with making sure people like the Kozlovs don't exist in my city anymore. They found Anton Petrov zip-tied to a chair in the warehouse office, looking significantly worse than when Marcus had picked him up. Petrov was mid-30s, built like someone who spent more time at the gym than doing actual work, wearing a tracksuit that probably cost more than Elena made in a month. Mr. Moretti, Petrov said when Victor walked in. His voice was steady, but sweat beaded on his forehead. There's been a misunderstanding. No misunderstanding. You sent men to threaten a woman and her child. That's very clear. I was following orders. The Kozlovs wanted to send a message after what happened at their warehouse. And you thought going after a civilian was the smart way to deliver that message? I thought... Petrov stopped, reading Victor's expression. I made a mistake. Yes, you did. Victor pulled up a chair and sat down across from him. So here's how this is going to work. You're going to tell me everything about the Kozlov operation, who they're connected to, where their money comes from, what properties they own, where Dmitri sleeps at night, everything. If I tell you that, they'll kill me. And if you don't tell me, I'll kill you right now. So you're choosing between definitely dying in the next 5 minutes, or possibly dying later if the Kozlovs find out you talked. Seems like an easy choice. Petrov talked. He talked for 90 minutes, giving up every detail Victor asked for. The Kozlovs had 6 primary operations in Boston: loan sharking, stolen goods, a protection racket, 2 brothels, a chop shop, and a money laundering front posing as an import business. They were connected to a larger organization in Brighton Beach, but operated semi-independently. Dmitri was the smart one. His brother Yuri was the muscle. They had ambitions to expand, saw Boston as underutilized territory. They think you're weak, Petrov said. Think you've gotten comfortable. That you're more businessman now than criminal, and that means you can be pushed aside. They're about to learn differently, Victor said. He left Petrov zip-tied and went back to his car where Marcus was waiting. Call everyone, Victor said. I want a meeting tonight. Everyone who matters. Everyone who's been watching to see if I've gone soft. I'm going to show them exactly what I'm still capable of. And the Kozlovs? We hit every single one of their operations simultaneously. I want it coordinated, thorough, and impossible to miss. By tomorrow morning, the Kozlov brothers should have nothing left in this city. Marcus nodded slowly. This is going to make noise. Police, FBI, everyone's going to notice. Let them notice. I'm tired of operating in the shadows. Time to remind everyone why the shadows belong to me. The meeting happened in a private room at a restaurant Victor owned in the North End. 20 men showed up, the real power in Boston's underworld. Not the street-level operators, but the people who controlled territories, who moved serious money, who'd been around long enough to remember when Victor had built his empire from nothing. Victor stood at the head of the table and looked at each of them. Some of you have been wondering if I've lost my edge, he said without preamble. Wondering if I'm still the person who built this organization. Wondering if maybe it's time for new leadership. Nobody spoke, but Victor could see the truth in their faces. They had been wondering. The Kozlov brothers made the same mistake, Victor continued. They thought I'd gone soft. Thought they could push into my territory, threaten people under my protection, operate like I was just going to roll over and let it happen. He paused. Tonight we're going to correct that misunderstanding. And we're going to do it in a way that makes sure nobody else makes the same mistake again. He laid out the plan. 6 teams, 6 targets, all hitting at exactly 10 p.m. Overwhelming force, no mercy, complete destruction of the Kozlov operation. It would be the largest coordinated action Victor had authorized in 5 years. After tonight, Victor said, the Kozlovs are done in Boston, and everyone in this room, everyone in this city is going to understand something very clearly. I didn't build this organization by being nice. I didn't maintain it by being weak, and I'm not going to lose it because I showed one person mercy. He met their eyes one by one. But I am going to change how we operate. No more targeting civilians. No more going after families. No more using people's children as leverage. We're criminals, but we don't have to be monsters. Anyone who can't live with that can leave now. Nobody moved. Good, Victor said. Then let's get to work. At exactly 10 p.m., Victor's people hit all 6 Kozlov operations. The loan sharking office got raided, files seized, the manager convinced to retire immediately. The stolen goods warehouse burned. Victor made sure it was empty first, but everything inside turned to ash. The protection racket's collection crew got intercepted and beaten badly enough to send a message. The brothels got shut down, the women inside given money and transportation to wherever they wanted to go. The chop shop's equipment got destroyed, rendered completely inoperable, and the import business's front office got vandalized so thoroughly that it would take months to rebuild. Victor personally handled Dmitry Kozlov. He'd gotten Dmitry's home address from Petrov, a luxury condo in Seaport that Dmitry thought was anonymous but wasn't. Victor arrived with Marcus and Tony at 10:15 after the other operations were already complete. They didn't break down the door. Victor knocked, polite as a neighbor. Dmitry answered in expensive loungewear, a glass of wine in hand, clearly not expecting trouble. His expression went from annoyed to terrified in the space of a heartbeat when he saw who was standing in his hallway. Mr. Moretti, he said, this is unexpected. Can we come in, or do you want to have this conversation where your neighbors can hear? Dmitry stepped aside. The condo was exactly what Victor expected. Expensive furniture, meaningless art, the kind of place that screamed money but had no personality. Dmitry set down his wine glass with a hand that shook slightly. I assume you're here about the warehouse incident, Dmitry said, trying to maintain composure. That was Yuri. He doesn't always think before he acts. I was planning to reach out, smooth things over. Sit down, Victor said. Dmitry sat. In the past 3 hours, Victor continued, every operation you run in Boston has been destroyed. Your loan business, your protection racket, your warehouses, your front companies, all of it gone. By tomorrow morning, you'll have nothing left in this city except this condo and whatever money you've got in offshore accounts. Dmitry's face had gone pale. You can't. I can. I did. It's already done. Victor remained standing, looking down at him. You made 2 mistakes. First, you thought you could operate in my city without my permission. Second, you thought going after a civilian woman and her child was an acceptable way to send a message. Both of those mistakes end tonight. The Brighton Beach people won't accept this. They'll retaliate. Let them try. I've dealt with bigger threats than some Russian gangsters who think they're tougher than they are. Victor leaned forward. Here's what's going to happen. You and Yuri are going to leave Boston tonight. You're going to go back to New York, and you're going to tell your Brighton Beach friends that Boston is closed to them. If they want to operate here, they do it through me, by my rules, or they don't operate at all. And if we refuse, then I won't be this polite next time. Next time, you don't get a warning and a chance to leave. Next time, you disappear, and nobody ever finds what's left. Dmitri stared at him, trying to find some angle, some leverage. Victor could see the wheels turning, the desperate calculation. I need 24 hours, Dmitri finally said, to liquidate assets, settle accounts. You have 6 hours, sunrise. If you're still in Boston after that, the offer expires. Victor left without waiting for a response. In the car, Marcus let out a long breath. That was cleaner than I expected. Clean doesn't mean it's over. The Brighton Beach people might still push back. You really ready for that fight? I'm ready for whatever comes. But I think they'll be smart. They'll realize Boston isn't worth the cost. Victor looked out at the city lights. And if they're not smart, we'll teach them. It was past midnight when Victor finally went back to his condo. He should have been exhausted. He'd barely slept, had orchestrated the dismantling of an entire criminal operation, had made threats he'd have to back up if called on them. But he felt more awake than he had in years. His phone rang. Elena. Hey, he answered. Are you okay? I saw the news. There were fires, police activity all over the city. People are saying it's gang warfare. I'm fine, and it's not warfare. It's cleanup. Cleanup of what? The people who came to your apartment. The people who thought they could use you to get to me. They're gone now, permanently. Elena was quiet for a moment. What did you do, Vic? What I had to, what I should have done weeks ago. I don't know if I should be grateful or terrified. Both is reasonable. Victor sat down on his couch, suddenly feeling the weight of the night. But I need you to understand something. I rebuilt my entire operation tonight, changed rules that have been in place for 20 years, made enemies I'll have to deal with eventually. And I did it all because I couldn't stand the thought of someone threatening you or Noah again. Vic, I'm not asking you to thank me. I'm not asking you to forgive me for being the reason you needed protecting in the first place. I'm just telling you that everything I am, everything I've built, everything I'm capable of, it's all pointed at making sure you're safe. And that's not going to change, whether you want me in your life or not. He could hear her breathing on the other end of the line, could imagine her processing what he'd just said. I'm still angry at you, she finally said. For the debt, for invading my privacy, for all of it. I know. But I'm also... She stopped. When those men showed up last night, you were the first person I called. Not the police, not my neighbor, not anyone else. You, and you came. You always come. And I don't know what to do with that. You don't have to do anything with it. Just let it be true. It's not that simple. It is, though. I care about you and Noah. You call, I come. That's as simple as it gets. Elena laughed, but it sounded close to crying. You're a crime boss who just destroyed an entire organization in one night because someone threatened me. Nothing about this is simple. Fair point. Can you come to dinner tomorrow? Noah keeps asking about you, and I think we need to talk, really talk, about what this is, what it can be, what happens next. Yeah, I'll be there. 6:30, I'll bring dessert. After they hung up, Victor sat in the dark and thought about the path that had led him here. From a kid in Southie, watching his mother work herself to death, to a criminal empire built on fear and violence, to sitting alone in an expensive condo, wondering if a woman who made sandwiches from a food truck could ever really accept who he was. The answer should have been no, but maybe the right answer was that she didn't have to accept who he'd been. Maybe she just had to accept who he was trying to become. The next morning, Victor met with his accountant, not Marcus, but the legitimate accountant who handled his legal businesses. I want to restructure, Victor told him. Move more money into legal operations. Real estate development, construction, property management. Less cash business, more transparent operations. The accountant looked surprised. That's going to reduce profitability significantly. The gray area operations are where you make the most margin. I know. Do it anyway. Can I ask why? Because I'm tired of building things on foundations that can collapse. I want something that lasts, something I can be proud of. Victor paused. Something I could explain to a 6-year-old without lying. The accountant didn't ask for clarification, Just made notes and promised to have restructuring options by the end of the week. Victor spent the afternoon dismantling the parts of his operation he'd decided he couldn't live with anymore. The loan sharking business, all of it, not just Premier Capital, but every predatory lending operation he controlled, got shut down. Existing debts got restructured to reasonable terms or forgiven entirely. Some people on his payroll objected. Victor made it clear objections weren't being accepted. By evening, he'd burned through 20 years of carefully built infrastructure and didn't regret a single decision. Marcus found him in his office at 5 p.m., looking at the financial projections of what the changes would cost. "You're really doing this," Marcus said. "I really am." The old Victor would have called this suicide. The old Victor was building an empire. The new Victor is trying to build a life. Victor looked up at him. "You okay with that? Because if you're not, I understand. You signed up for one thing, and I'm changing it into something else." Marcus sat down. "Can I tell you something? I've been with you for 8 years. I've watched you make 100 decisions, most of them smart, some of them ruthless. But I've never seen you happy. Not once. Not until you started going to that food truck." He paused. "So yeah, I'm okay with this. Because maybe happiness is worth more than profit margins." "You're getting soft. I learned from the best." Victor smiled despite himself. "Thank you for everything, for staying. Where else am I going to go? You're the only boss who pays me enough to afford private school for my kids." At 6:20, Victor arrived at Elena's apartment with a chocolate cake from a bakery in the North End and a knot of nervousness in his stomach that felt foreign and uncomfortable. Noah answered the door, dinosaur book already in hand. "Vic, Mom said you were coming. I found a new book about the Permian period. That's before the dinosaurs, but there were cool animals anyway, and I want to show you." "Let him come inside first," Elena called from the kitchen. Victor entered, and the apartment smelled like garlic and tomatoes and something baking. Elena appeared from the kitchen, wiping her hands on a towel, and for a moment they just looked at each other. "Hey," she said. "Hey, that's a very big cake. I wasn't sure what kind Noah liked." "He likes all cake. It's cake." Noah grabbed Victor's hand and pulled him toward the living room. "Okay, so before dinosaurs, there were these things called pelycosaurs, and they had these big sails on their backs. Dinner was lasagna, salad, and garlic bread. Noah talked nonstop about prehistoric animals. Elena watched Victor with an expression he couldn't quite read. Part caution, part curiosity, part something that might have been hope. After dinner, after Noah had gone to bed following a vigorous negotiation about how many more pages he could read, Elena and Victor sat on the couch with coffee. "So," Elena said, "you wanted to talk. You said we needed to talk." "Same thing." She set down her coffee. "I've been thinking a lot about this. About us. About whether there can even be an us given everything. And what did you conclude? That I don't know. That it's complicated, that you're dangerous and you've hurt people and you built an empire on other people's desperation, and I should run as far away from you as possible." She looked at him. "But I'm not going to." Victor's heart kicked. "Why not?" "Because I've seen who you are when you're here. With Noah, with me. And that person isn't the crime boss. That person is someone who makes pancakes and learns about dinosaurs and shows up in the middle of the night when I'm scared. That person is someone I could—" She stopped. "Someone I already care about. More than I should. I care about you too. More than I've cared about anyone in 20 years. "I know. You proved that last night. You proved it every time you came to my truck, every time you helped without being asked, every time you chose to be here instead of wherever crime bosses usually are." Elena's voice got quieter. "But Vic, I need to know this is real. Not just you trying to be someone different for a few hours. I need to know you're actually changing, not just performing change. I shut down my loan sharking operations today, all of them. Forgave debts, restructured payment terms, dismantled the entire system. And I'm moving money into legitimate businesses, getting out of the gray areas, rebuilding my operation into something I can defend without lying." Elena stared at him. "You did that today?" "Yeah." "Why?" "Because Noah asked me why I don't have kids. And I realized I could never have a family. A real family, not some transaction, while I was making my money destroying other people's families. So I stopped." Victor set down his own coffee. I'm not going to pretend I'm suddenly a good person. I'm not. I've done terrible things, and I'll probably have to do more terrible things to protect what I've built. But I'm trying to draw lines I won't cross anymore. And one of those lines is being someone you and Noah can't respect. You're really doing this, changing everything. I'm really trying. Elena was quiet for a long moment. Then she moved closer to him on the couch, close enough that he could feel her warmth. I'm still scared, she said. I'm scared of your world, scared of the violence, scared that someday someone's going to come through that door and take you away from us. But I'm more scared of living the rest of my life wondering what could have been if I'd been brave enough to try. Elena. She kissed him. It was tentative at first, questioning, like she was still deciding if this was a mistake. But then her hand came up to his face, and the kiss deepened, and Victor felt something crack open inside his chest that he hadn't known was locked. When they broke apart, Elena's eyes were wet. Don't make me regret this, she whispered. I won't. I promise. And don't promise things you can't guarantee, just promise to try. I can do that. I will do that. They sat together on the couch, Elena's head on his shoulder, Victor's arm around her, and for the first time in his adult life, Victor felt like he'd found something worth more than power. The next 6 months changed everything. Victor restructured his entire operation, moved money into legitimate ventures, cut ties with the parts of his business he couldn't justify. Some people left, some people stayed. Marcus stayed, helping navigate the transition from criminal empire to something that could pass for respectability. The Kozlov brothers left Boston and didn't come back. The Brighton Beach organization sent someone to negotiate terms, and Victor established clear boundaries. They could operate in specific areas under specific rules, but his territory was his territory. They accepted. Elena's business grew. Victor helped her expand from 1 truck to 2, then into a small storefront that did catering. He helped with financing, with permits, with making sure nobody gave her problems. She insisted on paying him back, so they structured it as a business loan with reasonable terms. Noah turned 7 and decided he wanted to be a paleontologist and a chef when he grew up. Victor took him to the Museum of Natural History and let him explain every exhibit in exhaustive detail. He taught Noah to play chess. He helped with homework. He became a fixture at the apartment, at the storefront, in their lives. And slowly, carefully, Victor learned what it meant to be part of something besides his empire. It wasn't easy. There were nights when old problems surfaced, when Victor had to handle threats the old way, when Elena saw parts of him that scared her. There were arguments. There were moments when she questioned whether this could work, whether she was putting Noah at risk, whether loving someone like Victor was sustainable. But they worked through it. Because underneath the complications, underneath the fear and the history and the impossible odds, there was something real. On a Sunday morning in June, Victor woke up in Elena's apartment. He'd been staying there more nights than not for the past 2 months. To find Noah standing beside the bed, staring at him. You're still here, Noah said. Yeah, I'm still here. Are you going to stay? Victor understood what he was really asking. Not about this morning, but about everything. About whether Victor was permanent or temporary. About whether he'd be another person who disappeared from Noah's life. I'm going to stay, Victor said. If your mom wants me to. If you want me to. I want you to. Noah climbed onto the bed and settled between Victor and Elena, who was starting to wake up. Mom's happier when you're here, and you're good at helping with my homework. Elena opened her eyes and smiled at both of them. What are we talking about? Vic's staying, Noah announced. I asked, and he said yes. Did he now? Elena looked at Victor over Noah's head. That's a big decision. Someone's got to make sure this kid learns proper chess strategy, Victor said. And someone's got to help Mom with the catering orders, Noah added. And someone's got to be here for movie night. Sounds like you've got my whole schedule figured out, Victor said. Pretty much. Later, after Noah had gone to watch cartoons and they were alone in the kitchen making breakfast, Elena turned to Victor. Did you mean it? She asked. About staying? Yeah, if you'll have me. You know it's not going to be perfect. We're going to have problems. Your past is always going to be there, and my trust issues aren't going to magically disappear. I know. And Noah's going to have questions eventually, real questions about what you do, who you are, and we're going to have to figure out how to answer them honestly. We'll figure it out together. Elena moved into his arms, and Victor held her like she was the most valuable thing he'd ever possessed. Because she was. "I love you," she said quietly. "I probably shouldn't, but I do. I love you too. And I'm going to spend the rest of my life trying to deserve it." A year later, Victor proposed. He did it at the food truck, the original one, which Elena had kept even after opening the storefront. She was closing up for the day, wiping down surfaces, humming to some song on the radio. Victor had the ring in his pocket, had been carrying it for 3 weeks, waiting for the right moment. "Elena," he said. She looked up. "Yeah? I need to ask you something." "Okay." He pulled out the ring, simple, elegant, nothing ostentatious because that wasn't her style, and held it up. "I know I'm not the person you imagine building a life with. I know I come with complications and history and a world that's always going to be part of who I am. But you and Noah, you're the best thing that's ever happened to me. You're the reason I get up in the morning. You're the reason I changed everything about how I operate. You're the reason I learned what it means to actually live instead of just survive." He paused. "So I'm asking, will you marry me?" Elena stared at the ring, her eyes filling with tears. "That's a really big diamond for someone who claims not to be ostentatious," she said. "Is that a yes?" "That's a, you're terrible at following instructions." But she was smiling. "And yes. Yes, I'll marry you." Victor slid the ring onto her finger, and she pulled him into the truck, and they stood there kissing while the city moved around them, indifferent and alive. They got married 6 months later in a small ceremony. Just close friends, Marcus and his family, Mrs. Chen, a few people from Elena's world, and a few from Victor's. Noah was the ring bearer and took his duties very seriously. During the reception, Marcus pulled Victor aside. "You did it," Marcus said. "You actually changed your life. We're still running most of the same operations." "Yeah, but now they're legal operations, legitimate businesses. You're basically a real estate developer who happens to know a lot of criminals." "That's one way to put it. And you're happy. That's the weird part. You're actually happy." Victor looked across the room at Elena, who was dancing with Noah, both of them laughing. "Yeah," he said, "I am." 2 years after that, Elena was pregnant. They talked about it, whether it was fair to bring another child into Victor's complicated world, whether the risks were acceptable, whether they could protect a baby the way they'd learned to protect Noah. In the end, they decided that fear wasn't a good enough reason to avoid building the life they wanted. Their daughter was born on a Tuesday in March, 8 pounds 3 ounces, with her mother's eyes and her father's stubbornness. They named her Sophia. Victor held her in this hospital room, this tiny person who was somehow part of him, and felt terror and wonder in equal measure. "She's perfect," Elena said from the bed, exhausted but smiling. "She's terrifying." That too. Noah, who was 10 now and very invested in being a good big brother, peered at Sophia with scientific interest. "She's really small." "Are all babies that small?" "You were that small once," Elena said. "Weird." Victor looked at his family, his wife, his son, who wasn't biologically his but felt like his anyway, his daughter, who was barely 2 hours old, and understood something he'd never fully grasped before. This was what winning actually looked like. Not territory or money or power. This messy, complicated, terrifying, perfect thing called family. 5 years later, Victor stood in his office at Moretti Development Corporation and looked out at the Boston skyline. The company was fully legitimate now. Real construction projects, actual real estate development, transparent financing. He still had connections to his old world, still handled problems when they arose, but the empire he'd built had transformed into something he could defend in daylight. Marcus knocked on the open door. "You ready for the meeting?" "Which meeting?" "The one with the mayor's office, about the affordable housing project in Dorchester." Victor had been working on the project for 18 months. Mixed income housing, community spaces, local hiring requirements. The kind of development that would have made his younger self laugh. No profit margin worth mentioning, too many complications, too many stakeholders to manage. But it was the kind of project his mother would have been proud of. "Yeah," Victor said. "I'm ready." That evening, he went home to the house he and Elena had bought in Brookline, big enough for their growing family, close enough to the city for work, with a yard where Noah could practice soccer and Sophia could play. Elena was in the kitchen, Sophia helping her make dinner with the intense concentration of a 5-year-old measuring flour. Noah was at the table doing homework, complaining about geometry. "How was your day?" Elena asked as Victor came in. "Long, productive. The mayor's office approved the Dorchester project." "That's great. It's going to lose money. Some things are worth more than profit." Elena kissed him. "I'm proud of you." Later, after dinner, after homework was checked and Sophia was convinced to go to bed, after Noah had given his nightly analysis of whatever he'd learned in school, Victor and Elena sat on their back porch with coffee and watched the sun set. "Do you ever miss it?" Elena asked. "The old life, the power." Victor thought about that honestly. Sometimes. There was a simplicity to it, clear rules, clear consequences, clear lines of control. But I wouldn't trade this for anything. Not the power, not the money, not any of it. He took her hand. "You saved my life, you know. I served you sandwiches. You showed me I could be something besides what I'd built. You gave me a reason to change. You and Noah and Sophia, you're the reason I'm not still sitting in an office making terrible decisions and calling it business." Elena leaned her head on his shoulder. "We saved each other then, because I was drowning before you showed up. Not just financially. I was drowning in grief and responsibility and the weight of trying to be everything for Noah. And you gave me space to breathe. You gave me help when I needed it. You gave me love when I didn't think I deserved it." They sat in comfortable silence as the sky darkened and the city lights came on in the distance. Victor thought about the path that had led him here. From a kid in Southie to a crime boss to this, a husband, a father, a man trying to build something worth leaving behind. It hadn't been smooth. It hadn't been easy. There had been violence and betrayal and moments when everything could have fallen apart. But he'd made a choice, standing outside a food truck 7 years ago, to care about someone besides himself. And that choice had changed everything. "I love you," he said quietly. "I love you too," Elena replied. "Now come inside. Sophia wants you to read her the dinosaur book again." She's 5. That book is way above her reading level. She doesn't care. She just likes hearing your voice. Victor followed his wife inside, where his daughter was waiting with a book about prehistoric creatures, where his son was building something complicated with Lego blocks, where the life he'd built waited for him. It wasn't the empire he'd imagined when he was young and hungry and desperate for power. It was better, because power was temporary, territory was temporary, fear was temporary. But this, family, love, the choice to be better than you were, this lasted. This was what it meant to actually win. And Victor Moretti, who'd spent most of his life fighting for dominance, had finally learned that the only battle worth winning was the one against your own worst instincts. He'd fought that battle. And he'd won. Not perfectly, not completely, but enough. And in the end, enough was more than he'd ever thought possible.